welcome to the Wednesday Club. How's everyone doing out there?
I'm good.
Yeah, you're good. You're good. By the way, I want to point out that Star Pilot 6 said that they were calling it. It was Dormammu's fault that we started a couple minutes late. You are correct. It was Dormammu. He had help from Satanish and Umar.
Today is gonna be great, y'all.
And possibly the Octessence. But we don't know. We'll get into all of that later. But in the meantime, welcome to the Wednesday Club. I'm Matt Key, and this is...
I'm Amy Dallen, and we are joined today by...
Alan Kistler.
Yay! The Sizzler himself, Alan Kistler, who knows more than any one man or woman should know about comics.
Yes.
Should.
Not the most, but
I'll
should.
put you in a room with Mark Evanier and Trina Robbins and just see what happens.
Mark's a great man. I would totally have a good conversation with him.
If I may, to the audience, the way that I perceive you guys to feel about us, like, hey, it's the Wednesday Club, and they know a lot about comics. I'm gonna go watch them talk about that. That's the way I feel about Alan. Like, I could just sit and watch Alan talk to nobody about comics.
That's my new show. Just me talking to the camera, not blinking.
See, until you got to the not blinking part, I was like, that's not weird. You can do that. I've done that show.
That's a little unnerving that you're not blinking. But if you wanted to do that show and eat apples, like, hey everybody, I'm eating apples and talking comics, and you could call it Apples and Comics.
Snacks and comics?
How could that not succeed?
Sizzler snacks.
Everyone, Sizzler snacks.
Done.
I like it.
Sizzler snacks and sequentials.
I like that we keep building on the alliteration here.
Of course we do. This is comics.
And it's Doctor Strange, which is all about alliteration.
Which is all about
many of you know
alliteration.
Alan, he has been a previous guest. You were on the Pull and Drama Club, right? Or did I just
I
not
was
get you into the Drama Club?
I was just in Drama Club Heroes. And
I did that. That was so fun when
It
I got
was real
to
fun.
I got to do Dr. Octopus and the original James Cameron, right?
The
Spider-Man.
James Cameron,
James
the one
Cameron.
right before him that has his name on it, but he had nothing to do with.
So the rumor was that he wanted Dr. Octopus to be played by Arnold Schwarzenegger, so I got to read the entire script as Dr. Octopus, like this. It was great. It was so, oh my god, it was more fun than it should have been, I think.
we did Jurassic Park 4, which was terrible. And I wound up taking over for the protagonist in like the last episode or two, and finally just did it as Zap Brannigan.
It was
Leela.
a great choice.
Leela. Who was it that was reading all of the Trump quotes? Is that Brannigan?
That was Billy West.
Billy West.
The
or-
real
Zap.
Zap Brannigan.
the legit.
And Mark Hamill read some as the Joker.
Yeah, yeah, so good. Don't want to get into politics, but those are really
Those are
funny.
brilliant.
All right, welcome
Still
to the Wednesday
talking
Club.
cartoons.
Yeah, we're still welcome to the Wednesday Club. Today our title is Sanctum Sanctorum because that is the name of Doctor Strange's manse, his house, his Greenwich Village mansion.
So we're gonna get into all this, but one thing I loved because I've read Doctor Strange here and there. I know bits and pieces. Like when you're a Marvel fan, you just absorb certain characters. Sure. I have no idea what the first Doctor Strange story I read was, and I've read very little of his solo work, mostly ensemble stuff. So I was going back through the masterworks to read the early Lee Ditko stuff. And that apartment shows up instantly.
Yeah.
So much of Doctor Strange, like much has evolved and grown over time,
Yeah.
but so much was in place from the get.
It's all Ditko too. That's what. Should we get into that, or should I like give an introduction?
You're
Like,
behind the table.
actually-
I'm jumping all over the place.
I don't know how this
ahead.
works. I've never been behind the counter, so I don't know how this works. You're watching me learn on the job, everybody. Welcome to the show. Today we're talking Doctor Strange. We're going to use that as a jumping off point to talk about other magical characters in both Marvel and DC and anything else. We'll be answering your questions about magic and comics. Hopefully we'll have time to address like the necessity, like the narrative necessity for rules. What makes Doctor Strange so tricky to write and other magical characters so tricky to write. Why those stories can succeed or fail, all that stuff. Because magic is tricky. It's a tricky narrative thing to do because magic solves everything. Like you like
Depending on how you play it.
depending on how you play it.
Yeah.
But narratives require conflict, and if magic can get rid of conflict, how do you write that story? So hopefully we'll get into that a little bit. Not that I know anything that I'm talking about in regards to that, but I assume that you two do.
We make it up as we go.
So anyway, we're going to talk about that, and I'm going to do my best to do the deepest possible dive into the I have not read all Doctor Strange. Like I was going
Amateur.
through. You phony, get out!
Don't geek shame here. I don't know it. I know you.
Yeah. I'm just admitting, I consider myself a Doctor Strange expert, despite the fact that I have not read. In fact, I was going through the list last night and putting together a chronology for the show, and I was like, oh my god, I've never read Doctor Strange. I've read like 4 issues from Doctor Strange Sorcerer Supreme, which was the title that ran through the 90s. That's like the biggest hole for me. I haven't read all of the volume 2 from the I've read almost everything in the early 70s, but I haven't read.
Give us some context. Who's Doctor Strange and when was he created?
What
company does he go with? What does he do? He's some kind of doctor?
Well, Doctor Strange was created by Steve Ditko and pitched to Stan Lee, who approved it and then put his name on it as well.
You may know Steve Ditko as the artist and co-creator of Spider-Man.
Yeah. Steve Ditko was a big guy in the 60s and 70s, crucial to Marvel's development. He then went solo and did his own thing. Still alive, as far as
he is. He's
an absolute hermit, a recluse.
He also was a major factor behind characters like The Question, and he had falling out with Stan Lee during the Spider-Man days. And he's an interesting cat because he's someone who follows the Ayn Rand idea of
very black and
justice
white.
In fact,
no, I don't know if I want to know this.
Yeah, so
do I want to know this?
He had a character, Mr. A, who was a precursor to The Question, and Mr. A would leave a business card that was just half black, half white, and because in Mr. A's viewpoint, A equals A. There is good and there is evil and there is nothing in between.
And no one needs phone numbers.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And likewise he followed that with The Question and all, and so that's
Question
one
is a DC hero who's also a sort of justice seeker, but has gotten weirder.
He also, speaking of weird characters, Steve Ditko also created the Creeper.
Yeah.
At DC,
which is basically like the Joker.
Yeah, it's sort of like a heroic Joker with a red. Either boa or mane, depending on which artist.
And a yellow
Google
face,
search.
right?
Yeah. I guess don't just Google search Creeper, but look up Creeper DC Comics.
DC Comics.
Don't say that when I have coffee. I almost spit all over Alan.
But so one of the things that's interesting to me about Doctor Strange then is that Ditko is such a pragmatist with so many of his stories and how he approaches stories, and with Spider-Man, it's been said by different sources that he actually. Part of how you see the shift from when Lee was really writing the stuff and when he started turning over writing duties to Ditko and was just tweaking and improvising some dialogue here and there, that you lost a lot of the asides of like some kid looking up the street like, oh my God, who's that? And the mom going, come on, we're late for school.
Yeah.
Or Spider-Man, or like J. Jonah Jameson saying like, go get yourself some spin records, kids. And like all these little things, and Peter having real conflict about maybe I should just be the criminal everyone thinks I am, started going away when Ditko took over. Because Ditko wasn't into heroes who have that moral introspection, that black and white gray area. And so I find it very interesting that he went into Doctor Strange, which, although Doctor Strange seems to be a determined person with a sense of purpose, lives in this weird, abstract, conceptual world.
And this is a very famous sort of aspect of it because, of course, the early Doctor Strange comics, which I think we're probably about to get into, became very influential on a lot of people in the late 60s, sort of participating in psychedelic movements and making posters for things. Yeah. And there are lots of sort of legendary stories of weird hippies who wanted to track down the creator of this guy, and they would meet Steve Ditko, this crew cut, straightforward, not dude, one of them at all, and then sort of be confused.
Yeah. Well, let's get into all that, but first let me answer the question that you gave.
Dr. Strange?
Who is Dr. Strange? Dr. Strange, if you don't know, Dr. Stephen Strange, he's a neurosurgeon. He's arrogant. No one really likes him. He's all about money. He'll turn down patients that he knows he could save if they're not going to add to his bank account or a claim.
Kind of brutal.
Very brutal.
He's like a mean house.
Yes, mean house.
Mean house.
Yeah.
I guess house is already mean, but no heart of gold house.
Right.
Yeah. There's no heart in the early Doctor Stephen Strange. And by the way, you don't get that origin story until issue number 115. So Doctor Strange starts in issue 110.
Oh, Old days comic books would have sort of long-running anthology titles so that they could try out different characters because they didn't want to waste a bunch of money all the time launching something that they didn't even know was going to work.
One of my prides and joys.
So pop that up. This is worth looking at. An amazing thing about this cover is that there is no way for you to know that this is the debut of the character that would change Mackey's life.
No, there's no way for you to know because what you have here, goodbye, Eye of Agamotto. That's the Eye of Agamotto. These are all gifts from Brittany, by the way. What you have here is a Human Torch in a cage with Paste Pot Pete and
the Wizard.
The Wizard, thank you. You don't, but you get the Wizard and Paste Pot Pete. There's no mention of Doctor Strange on this, so here's what happens. They've got Strange Tales, Tales of Suspense, Amazing Fantasy,
Tales to Astonish,
Journey
into Mystery.
And I think at the time they had a publishing deal with like DC, not DC, but like the same publisher who did DC, and they were only able to publish 6 to 8 titles, I think, a month or something like that. So
there was a maximum number of titles that they could put out. So you would have an anthology that would have 2 characters regularly appear in it.
So Strange Tales was one of those. In the earlier days of Marvel, like when Marvel, like Fantastic Four and all that came out, it was mostly Human Torch and Thing and Strange Tales. Every once in a while you get like the Fantastic Four all in there, but then it eventually became Nick Fury and S.H.I.E.L.D. But when it became Nick Fury and S.H.I.E.L.D., it was almost always Nick Fury and S.H.I.E.L.D. at the beginning, and then Doctor Strange in the back half.
Right.
Which is not just a way of getting around that limit, but also a nice practical way to get people to buy things. Because they're just like, maybe you like this, maybe you like that. We've got both.
Especially because they're different genres.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing like when you put together a superhero team, half of what you're doing, if that's a superhero team like the Avengers or the Justice League where the other characters have their own solo adventures, you're also advertising other characters that your company publishes. So maybe you came into the team because you like Iron Man, but then you see this cat Captain America, and you're like, he seems pretty cool.
Yeah.
And you start looking for his stories as well.
Yeah.
And that's
How
the
to
beauty
get
behind
ya.
it. Yeah.
So I keep getting there's so much
So who's Doctor
to
Strange?
unpack. So Doctor Strange, he gets in a terrible car accident, and his hands are irreparably damaged. He, being a very wealthy doctor, uses all of his money to try and heal his hands. Various methods, experimental methods, all this other stuff. None of it works. When he gets to his last 100,000 or whatever, he just kind of loses it. And he's like, I'm going to try everything. He starts digging into the occult, starts digging into everything. Finally, eventually hears about this ancient one. And he's like, F it. Let's go for it. Like, I've got nothing else to lose. So he goes to Kamartaj, where he meets with the ancient one, discovers that they're talking about magic, and is like, no such thing. Thanks, but no. Ends up spending the night there because it's snowy mountains in the Himalayas. And as he's there, he uncovers this plot by Baron Mordo to kill the Ancient One so that Baron Mordo can take the place of the Ancient One.
This is one of the other students of the Ancient One.
At the time, he's the apprentice.
He is the apprentice to be the Ancient One at some point. But he wants more power. And after Doctor Strange discovers what he's up to and sees some magic going on, he's like, I've got to tell him. Doctor Strange's first foray with magic, not magic that he does, but magic acted upon him.
His first experience.
His first experience with actual magic is Baron Mordo putting a mystical lock on his mouth so he cannot talk.
Right. Well, he can't specifically. He can speak, but he can't.
He can speak, but he cannot.
He can't expose the plot.
Right.
Yeah.
He can't warn the Ancient One about this plot.
So he then has to figure out how to warn the Ancient One, and it kind of goes from there. And that's Strange Tales 110 and 111. And
well, here's the great. What I love about that origin story.
115. Thank you.
What I love about that origin story with Doctor Strange is that it is a proactive, heroic moment because at that time, like Doctor Stephen Strange could just leave the next morning and just decide, holy crap, magic is real. I am out of here.
I'm out of here.
Whatever
this is
power
insane.
play is happening between this Mordo guy
Don't
and
think
this
it's going to help with
ancient
my
dude,
hands.
it's not
going
going
to
to help me.
business.
It's not my thing. I didn't know about these guys yesterday. I can forget about them tomorrow. I will leave in the morning. Instead, he decides to risk his life because Mordo knows
So
that he
spoilers
knows.
for the end of the origin story. He goes to the Ancient One and says, who had offered previously to teach him, and sort of says, I want to accept your offer and be your student.
Right.
Because since he can't say, so that I can stop Baron Mordo from trying to kill you, he's like, the only thing I can think of, I have to stick around, I have to get him to stick around, so I'll do this. And the Ancient One basically goes, good job, you passed.
Yeah, basically, the Ancient One knew the whole time, like, because he's the Ancient One.
Yeah, and then so he immediately exiles Mordo and is just like, so you want to stick around? You want to learn some things? And
he does.
So in the original story, he just says, I keep him around so that I can keep an eye on him. I know he's evil. And it's just like, that's a bad plan. Stop teaching him magic, Ancient One.
Thank you for correcting me. That was issue 115.
Also, the brutal efficiency of comics in the old days, they do this in 5 pages, 8 pages?
5 to 6.
Yeah.
Yep. Doctor Strange's very first story is 6 pages long, and it features Nightmare. Nightmare was the first villain he ever came up against.
Speaking of right out the gate.
Right out the gate, it's like, welcome to Weird! Your nightmares are another dimension. Who knew? So Nightmare is the favorite villain of Scott Derrickson. In fact, he wanted to make the main villain of the Doctor Strange film Nightmare, and Kevin Feige was like, we're already doing enough to just explain magic in Doctor Strange. Explaining to the audience that their dreams are another dimension that's lorded over by some weird, strange, demonic entity that we can fight might be a little, much out of the gate. Yeah. So the second film right now, anytime Derrickson gives an interview, he's like, well, I really like Nightmare. So he's like, I like Nightmare, and we have to address Clea. So the second film, if there is a sequel, will probably involve Doctor Strange's girlfriend, one-time wife, then they're divorced, and she's the daughter to Umar, the niece to Dormammu, the Lord of the Dark Dimension. It's a weird...
Special lady from another world.
It is strange and wonderful and everything great with comics.
Strange, you say.
Strange. Goo. Pun intended, possibly.
What's also interesting about those first handful of tales is that it's actually sort of a throwback to almost the pulp stories when they had some kind of supernatural investigator, and that Strange isn't proactively going out as superheroes tend to do.
Yeah.
He's living in the village on Bleecker Street, and people come to him because when weird stuff happens, you will hear the stories of the black magic expert in the village.
The occult expert in Greenwich. He was like super weird and sticks out.
And what I love is that later on, Kevin Smith added an idea in his run on Daredevil.
Yeah.
And I think like issue 4 or 5, that Doctor Strange, a lot of the Marvel heroes are on a sliding scale. So even though Spider-Man and the Fantastic Four premiered in 1961 and 1962, in the timeline of Marvel Comics now, if you pick up today's Marvel comic, those events only happened roughly 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And that's how much Peter and the rest have aged. Whereas Doctor Strange, Kevin Smith implied that his 60s stories literally took place in the 60s still. And because he's magic, he has stopped aging, which actually is set up in a 70s story.
It's totally set up, and then he denies it so that he can be in love with Clea.
Right. And so Kevin Smith in that story talked about how Daredevil, being a kid growing up in Hell's Kitchen, had grown up on spooky stories about the witch doctor in the village. And likewise, like in Marvel Handbook 2005, they actually said, they went with that idea that, Doctor Strange is born in 1930 and trains like throughout the 50s and then sets up shop in the early 60s. But some comics contradict it. So it's one of those weird things in Marvel where like
even
some
the 15-year thing, like sometimes it applies, sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just sort of one of those don't ask.
Yeah, but I always liked that idea because I like that in between then, that's such a nice way to sort of fill in the gap, that in between Marvel's Golden Age heroes who are still around for a bit of the 50s but then are gone, that maybe Doctor Strange was doing overtime protecting the Earth before the Fantastic Four arrived, and he was able to start taking a few breaks.
Thank goodness.
Oh, man.
Oh, thank God. I don't have to fight it.
Yeah,
fight Nihilus on my own.
Yeah, like that he and Howard Stark and Nathaniel Richards over in S.H.I.E.L.D. were like, they were watching the shop.
Yeah.
So Doctor Strange goes to the Ancient One and picks him up some magic powers, and then somehow ends up in a mansion just sort of taking cases. What happens there?
I actually don't know why, because I don't think the Sanctum Sanctorum has any significance like it does in the movie, as like, I think maybe...
Many of you will have seen the big screen movie of Doctor Strange that premiered last November.
Is it like at a nexus? It's a mystical nexus.
There are stories later that talk about that as a central focal point of magic.
Yeah.
And so like that's Basically, like
and it's constantly under attack in some capacity from other dimensions, and that's why he has to be there to watch the doorways to all these other dimensions.
But essentially, wherever he is, he's fulfilling his role as a protector of our realm from the kinds of threats that come
extra
from
dimensional
all of this.
threats. Yeah.
I mean, he's sort of a mystical hall monitor because he's not he's not really against magic happening, whatever, and he's not necessarily even against beings from other dimensions.
Shenanigans.
Right. He's not even against other beings from other dimensions like coming to Earth, but if you're coming here to do some damage,
to start a ruckus,
right? Then he's sending you back home, and so the Sanctum Sanctorum is on a spot where it's much easier to access other dimensions.
Yeah, and that's why he's got like the window of the worlds. He can actually like in some issues he can look through the window of the worlds, and that's the big window. That's also the Seal of the Vishanti, also the Anomaly Rue. It's got 3 different names, but the window of the worlds is very specific.
Which also shows up immediately, which I was delighted by.
Yeah,
I
it's
really
all there.
thought
Like,
that would have been one of those things that like didn't get established for decades.
Ditko really he knew this character from the get-go. At least that's the way I think. Like everything I've ever read is that he got in it and pretty much knew what he wanted to do. And Stan Lee has even said Steve Ditko would draw the stuff, and like he would pitch a basic story, go home and draw the stuff, then bring it all to me. All I did was fill in the words and come up with stuff like hoary hosts of Hoggoth.
And that's the thing, you can tell when the Stan Lee influence starts getting stronger.
Yeah.
Because with Strange Tales 116, that's the first time we get verbal spells.
Yeah,
It's about 7 issues in.
Yeah. So like Doctor
Although
Strange.
he skipped a couple because they were
He
waiting to see whether people liked
it
him.
was 110, 111, 112, 13, and 14. He skipped, and then 15. So they skipped about 6 months of publishing.
I do love this because going back through the Masterworks, they literally just like they do a 5-page story, they do another one, they wait, and then when it comes back, it goes, well, we tried him out, and you guys wrote us a lot of letters, so here's Doctor Strange.
Yeah.
Like
Here's
it's all
more.
very simple. It's just like, oh, you wanted that? Good, we'll do more of that.
And like I think I was trying to do some research, and I've heard a couple different things that like these titles were published every other month. But then when I was like, I was looking at stuff last night, and it was like Strange Tales from June, Strange Tales from July, and I was like, but wait, so like I actually need to look into it a little bit more. But my understanding was that like there would be about 6 months between this issue and when they gave his origin story.
As I recall, a couple of the titles like X-Men and Avengers were published bi-monthly, whereas the anthologies were monthly.
Every month, okay.
Yeah.
Anyway. So he's I lost track. Where were we?
Well,
I'm like I'm thinking of so many different things right now. Like I'm so fun and exciting.
We also have a million wonderful questions piling up in chat, which we
great. Do you want
will
to throw some out?
Well, and I'm curious. This is something I think we definitely should touch on. If we've got the basic grounding of Doctor Strange. Before we get into this, actually, I would like to know how you discovered Doctor Strange. How you discovered Doctor Strange.
How did you discover Doctor Strange?
I was just thinking, we were talking in the Facebook chat earlier, I can't remember what the first Doctor Strange story I wrote was, because when you're a fan of something like Marvel or DC and you read a lot of these general universes, you get familiar with people and you're not even sure, like I don't remember not knowing who that was, but I think I almost always saw him in ensemble contexts or guest star roles.
That's how I discovered him. Yeah. So my first experience with Doctor Strange. I had just started reading the X-Men because that's the comic. If you remember our origins. My mom and dad were a little nervous for me to read comics due to our religious faith. But once they saw that I was okay they were like, let's give it a shot. They saw I was okay. I wasn't burning.
Yeah.
I wasn't rebelling against them and doing LSD all the time. It was like, all right, you know what?
With Doctor Strange.
Yeah, exactly. They were pretty cool with me reading whatever, as long as it wasn't like bloody and violent and like cursing all over the place. So I picked up pretty early on. I think like maybe the 5th or 6th comic book I ever owned was Infinity War 1 and 2. I had no context
the Marvel
for it.
Crossover.
I had never read Infinity Gauntlet. I didn't read that until a couple years later. I just knew that my comic, I loved Infinity War, and it kept referencing this Infinity Gauntlet thing. I was like, what is this? But Infinity War had Doctor Strange in it, and I was like, who is this guy? And I was immediately drawn to it because there were religious overtones, occult overtones, and it was all stuff that I was hyper interested in. Because I was studying my own Christianity from very early on, so that kind of stuff and intrigue, like the sort of religious and mythological intrigue, like
spiritual
immediately
dimension.
grabbed me. So I think the first actual Doctor Strange comic book I owned was Doctor Strange Sorcerer Supreme number 50. It was a glittery cover. I don't remember anything about it except that Wolverine and Spider-Woman were in it. I just remember, like, I think that was my first actual Doctor Strange comic. But that's how I discovered him, was through Infinity War. And then when I went and read Infinity Gauntlet, he was basically the doorway to go fight Thanos. And I was like, he was kind of like, all right, look, Thanos is out there. This guy, Adam Warlock, just appeared to me. He's like, this dude's legit. We need to go take care of this guy. So you guys all go do that. Here's a doorway. Go do that. I'm going to protect the Earth in the meantime by myself. And I was like, well, this guy's awesome. Like, he's like telling Captain America and Iron Man basically what to do. And the Hulk, he's like, Hulk, stop it. Go. Just go through the portal. Go. So I fell in love with him from there. So
That's amazing. Alan, is Doctor Strange personal to you?
I have a great affection for Doctor Strange, actually. We talked about this on the Facebook Live beforehand. I do think a lot of characters in Marvel and DC maybe work best if you gave them a mini-series every 2 years, or like one story every 2 years or something, because when you have an ongoing series, you will inevitably, especially if you're trying to fill in because one writer left before you wanted them to, or you didn't get the next writer that necessarily has the best voice for it, you'll have 6 months to a couple of years of stories where it just doesn't work well with the character.
Right.
Or especially if you read Doctor Strange through the 90s, the Sorcerer Supreme series, it seems like every couple of years the whole point is, and he lost the title of Sorcerer Supreme and has to earn it back again, which gets a little tired after the second time, you know. But I had a great affection for Doctor Strange. I got into him through Spider-Man, who was one of my early loves of superheroes at all. It was the Spider-Man annual from
number
like
2. That was the first time
not the
they
first
crossed
meeting.
over.
Not
Okay.
the first meeting. It was I want to say the late 70s or early 80s, where there was a prophecy that something was happening, and the and Doctor Doom and this demonic creature were both sort of in on it, and just like, and this thing will happen unless a man who is like both spider and of man will team up with a great sorcerer, and they'll stop it. And I was like, this is just getting weird, and I dig it. And I like that they had sort of an interesting banter. And then then the second Doctor Strange story I actually really found, other than his appearances, I did see his appearances in Infinity Gauntlet, Infinity War, but everyone was there. But the next one where he was at all a focus was it was a Marvel one of their premiere specials, like the fall special or something. There was a short story that was actually of his apprentice Rintra, taking on
Rintra.
in the 90s. One of Doctor Strange's...
I have a picture of Rintra if you want to show that weird guy from another dimension.
Like
Rintra
Rintra was a minotaur from another dimension. Who
I love that sentence so much.
Sure, yeah.
And he was learning magic, and then he became Doctor Strange's apprentice for a while. And in this short story I read, he took on human form to go. He had been reading Shakespeare on the Doctor's suggestion, and he took on human form to go watch Shakespeare in the park because he had never seen Shakespeare performed. And
Oh my god, this sounds delightful.
and stuff goes down. And so, in the midst of something, he winds up helping someone, but also accidentally loses his glamour, and he's now seen for what he is, and the audience kind of stops, and he then starts trying to play along with it, quoting A Midsummer Night's Dream, and he quotes Puck's lines, and it's just like, I go, look how I go, swifter than an arrow from the Tartar's bow, and like runs away, and the audience is just like, what? Is
that
this
part of the show?
and then he just
Are we
gets
doing
home.
an immersive theater thing right now?
And he gets home and he's just hoping like, okay, I got home okay. The Doctor doesn't have to know. And you see the Doctor Strange like, how's the play? Did you like it? Did you like? And he's holding a newspaper that has a photo of Rintra and says on the headline like a gentle beast, but one with a good heart. Like, it was another Shakespeare quote.
Sure.
I just thought that was delightful. I loved. He was not in it a lot, but I loved Doctor Strange's personality there as sort of this chill mentor.
Like,
Molly Pateki wants to track that one down, by the way, if you happen to remember what that was.
yeah, was that like a Marvel? Because I know there were a couple good Strange stories of Marvel fanfare.
It wasn't Marvel fanfare. It was Marvel premiere or something maybe. It was definitely in the 90s.
We can circle back to this one.
I'll figure it out. But yeah, it was just this delightful story. And what attracted me there was it was the first time I saw that Doctor Strange didn't take himself too seriously.
Yeah.
And that was another thing that had attracted me to him in Infinity War, because when we first see him in Infinity War, he is at his dinner table. He's just floating in the air, but it's not a thing. He's just doing it. And
It's just something that he does.
And Wong comes in, like, because he's reading something. Like, what are you reading? He's like, oh, I'm reading about this medical case about mass hysteria, like, happening in this village. I don't know, somewhere in Alaska or something. And I just loved that instantly. Like, he's a magician now. He's a true sorcerer, but still has an interest in medicine. That was his passion. And over breakfast, he's reading up on what are the most recent medical things and psychological things. So the fact that you had someone who was not discarding science, just he was accepting magic, was a really interesting take on it for me.
I think that's one of the main things that I identified with so much as a kid was
That he could float at the dinner table.
Yep, I wanted to float at the dinner table while I ate my Wheaties. Yeah, no, I love that.
Wheaties, you nerd.
Yeah, yeah, Alan. Yeah. No, I love that he was a man of science.
Yeah.
Who was still able to hold science in one hand and still study the occult in the other.
Yeah.
Like, he was like, science is still a thing, but also so is magic.
There are wider realms.
Yeah, and I love that. He was able to keep that in check and in balance with himself.
And of course, this was the thing that made, like, part of the reason Doctor Strange, while never being, like, a super headliner, has had a really big impact in some ways, was sort of being at the forefront of, like, we talked about this when we did our comics episode on sort of mental illness and depictions of, like, you can do things like to show a psychological landscape in comics.
Yeah.
And that's a thing you could do, like the idea of other dimensions, the idea of an astral plane, the idea of travel through time and weirdness and things like legitimate brilliance from Steve Ditko in those early days, and many wonderful talented people to follow have made use of the storytelling possibilities of comics to really explore stuff that you can't put into like your
Very much so.
slice of lifey comic.
Before we say anything else, I just realized I completely forgot to give credit to our chalkboard artist.
Ken Wynn!
Ken Wynn, who did an incredible job.
It's lovely.
At the Eye of Agamotto, we got the Cloak of Levitation. He's mustering some magic, and we still have my little Easter egg where I drew the seal of the Vishanti and permanent marker on a chalkboard without realizing that's what I had done. So.
And once again, he's casting a spell with the American Sign Language of "I love you."
Is that what that is, really?
I mean, coincidentally.
I just learned this.
I didn't know that. I know that this is. I know that that's his. I didn't know that was.
Depending on how you, yeah, but
I love you.
He's fighting even with the power of love. Who knew?
Like a Care Bear.
All right. Sorry. Before I derailed us, Amy and Alan, please say what you were going to say.
Well, I was just going to add another thing that Warren Ellis wound up writing about 3 issues of Doctor Strange, and then sadly left the title. I'm sure there was
When was this?
This was I want to say like 98, 97. And
is it connected to this person's question? What was up with Doctor Strange being quasi-evil with long blonde hair and an eye patch? Because I have no idea what that is.
That's the new Strange Tales title. That was like 1990.
That was. I actually have it written down here.
Yeah.
Strange Tales Volume 2 went from let's see, 80. It was like 85 to 88. Ish.
Yeah, because it was right before Sorcerer Supreme. It led into Sorcerer Supreme.
Yeah. So let's get into that. That's a big question.
Well, just before that, like what my point is that Warren Ellis like hit on that I thought also should be hit on more often is that Doctor Strange in that story still referred to himself as a surgeon, but now the cancer he was cutting out were demonic influences.
Oh,
and
I like that.
And I love that they were still like this surgical precision, that surgeon's mind of how you tackle a problem, and that you're treating the patient, but the patient is Earth or Earth's dimension or humanity's aura.
Yeah.
And I think that's a brilliant take on it. But yeah, so this story that we've been asked about was a return to black magic, which originally was the title. Yeah. Master of Black Magic.
So, which
was weird because the early stories are like, yes, I'm defeating the forces of evil using black magic. There doesn't seem to be any contradiction right at the start.
Well, before we get in, like, I just want to derail. One of my favorite Doctor Strange moments was when he summoned, like Zom, I want to say, to defeat the Hulk in World War Hulk, and then quickly lost control. But the fact that like Doctor Strange was like, no. Like the Hulk is like, I'm gonna win, and he's trying to be nice. He's trying to be a good guy. He like astrally projects them to like into Bruce Banner's mind to try and calm him down, and it works for a bit. Then like he turns on him again, like when it's this big giant thing, and then Doctor Strange at the end is like, I tried to be nice. But you're pushing my hand. You're destroying the Earth. So he summons this evil entity named I think Zom. This demonic entity into himself, which is basically like Dormammu, and beats the relentless crap out of the Hulk with it until the Hulk is able to be like Doctor Strange throws him, like Doctor Strange starts to lose control because the rage is too much, throws him into a building where innocents are there, and Doctor Strange realizes, oh no, I've been overcome by the evil inside of me. How do I control this? And Hulk actually saved all the people. And
well, this actually provides a great segue into the story we're talking about.
Yeah.
So this goes into how has the magic of Doctor Strange changed over time. So like when we mentioned earlier, like he's just doing magic.
Yeah.
And later in Strange Tales 116 is when he starts referencing entities. And he references the Vishanti, Dormammu, and Sidorak in that issue. And then it became this idea, and Stan Lee seemed to be the one developing it, that half of his spells, when he's saying, you know, by the vapors of Valtor or by the fangs of the Farala. Yeah. Those are actual entities in other dimensions, and he is borrowing their weapons
their
or their
extra-dimensional
powers.
power, Winds of Watum, Crimson
And-
Bands of Sidorak.
Right.
Yeah.
So in Marvel, anyone who has magic, like they're essentially they're utilizing either like energy of the earth around them, elemental energy, or they're using some kind of a totem or a talisman to focus this, or they are literally asking someone for a favor. Like, let me use the Crimson Bands of Sidorak. He is asking Sidorak, I need to bind this guy. Give me your bands for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And I will do that. And so it was an interesting way because that really went back to the idea of like Strange is not born. He's not Merlin. He's not born with some innate ability. He acquired this through study and concentration over the course of about a decade, as the original comics indicate. And in the 80s, we started getting into the idea of, okay, if you're borrowing stuff from other entities, there might be a problem with that. They might start asking you to do favors you don't want to do, and then also like how much of your power is actually in these items, especially Doctor Strange, like the Eye of Agamotto, the Cloak of Levitation, the Book of the Vishanti, which interestingly we're told has no combative spells.
Side note,
it's
Sork pens. Question: fave magical tool of Doctor Strange's. I'm going to pause this here while we answer this one and then continue.
Yeah. Favorite magical tool of
What
Doctor
is your favorite
Strange?
of his magical tools?
I think the Cloak of Levitation. I like
Shade to the eye.
No, it's not shade to the eye. It's just I can't remember the artist who made that, but Brittany got me for that for Christmas a couple years ago on Etsy. So if you want that, look on Etsy for Eye of Agamotto, and you can probably find it. But yeah, I like the Eye of Agamotto, but I feel like it's never really fully been defined as to what it can do, because it can do so much that I almost feel like it's almost like just a plot device more than anything. Whereas the cloak. It seems like it's a mystical totem and sort of like a badge of the office as Sorcerer Supreme. At least it becomes that kind of later on. And it's just cool. It
I'm
just
just going to say
looks cool.
the books.
Yeah, the library of Doctor Strange.
Because I love that he's a hero who fights with a library.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, and the Eye of Agamotto, like what they eventually established, they were essentially 3 talismans of Agamotto, and like
the Orb of Agamotto.
right, and like each one gives a perception on a different form of time. So like one looks into the past, the Orb of Agamotto looks into the future, and the Eye of Agamotto looks into the now and reveals truths about the now.
Yeah.
And I find that very enticing. But in the end, I got to say the Vishanti, because the Book of the Vishanti is so lovely, because it's not only just a spell book, it's a history. And so, and it's something that each Sorcerer Supreme adds to.
Yeah.
So that alone, just the idea of like you essentially have a journal of the legacy of Sorcerer Supreme.
That
starting
goes all
with,
the way back Agamotto.
Starting with Agamotto,
who was the first
itself.
Sorcerer Supreme,
Yeah. I love that idea.
Interestingly, we don't have to derail further, but that does lead right into Einhurst Crow, who asked, have they ever stated how many Sorcerer Supremes there have been in the universe? It seems the Ancient One was something of an immortal. How long will Stephen Strange live as a Sorcerer Supreme before it's cut off? But I'm going to guess. We can all make our own guesses.
I don't know that it's
about
ever
that.
been defined. We know that
There's
Agamotto
currently a
was
book
the
called
first.
Doctor Strange and the Sorcerers Supreme, so
Right.
the term gets
Yeah.
used loosely.
I mean, there's also occasionally a disconnect between is he Sorcerer Supreme of Earth or Earth's dimension.
Yeah.
That is occasionally contradicted in some stories. It tends to look like he's Sorcerer Supreme of Earth's dimension,
Yeah.
and Earth also happens to be a great focal point of magic in the Marvel
In this
universe.
particular dimension,
But Clea then is Sorcerer Supreme at one point of like the Dark Dimension.
the Dark Dimension,
and
yeah.
and
Please, the
Margulies,
aforementioned mystical lady.
right, and Margulies Zardos, who was the foster mother of Nightcrawler, was Sorcerer Supreme of the Winding Way, which was yet another dimension.
Then I believe if we can actually use this to circle back to the question of the blonde Doctor Strange.
Right.
I believe that there was this alien extraterrestrial entity named Urthona.
Right.
Urthona. I know I have a picture of that pulled if you guys want to find that one, but Urthona wanted to be Sorcerer Supreme, I believe, of this dimension, but he knew that there already was one.
Right.
So he
wanted more territory.
he wanted more territory, basically. So he was kind of like, I'm ready to be Sorcerer Supreme. This guy is nothing. I'm going to take this guy out. He's never met Doctor Strange, has no idea what Doctor Strange looks like. So he invades Earth and steals the entire Sanctum Sanctorum while, let me back up, he sends an evil general sort of character who's also like a very powerful sorcerer. This very powerful sorcerer mortally wounds Doctor Strange. Doctor Strange then uses his astral form to inhabit Morgana Blessing. Is that her name, correct?
Yeah, which was a great thing.
It was so great. It's a great picture of the cover has like a female Doctor Strange.
Yeah, we
and
finally got a
she's-
lady Doctor Strange.
And
It was
she's
great.
so badass. It was like, oh yeah, I would read it. I would read
I would
a
totally-
female Doctor
Look
Strange.
at her.
But you're
This is
telling me it
amazing,
did
yeah.
not then result
Look-
in just her having her own book forever because
Yeah.
What, right?
I'm
That's
getting
so
cosplay
awesome.
thoughts right now.
You should, and then just like you can borrow my cloak. Oh, I forgot I brought my Doctor Strange. It's in the prop closet right now. My Doctor Strange costume.
He just casually adds his cloak of legislation in the closet.
It's
That's-
just always there. But so,
Just floating in the background.
that
So-
story ended with Doctor Strange like deciding, well, there's too much of a risk that this guy will win, so I'm going to blow everything up.
Yeah.
I'm going to destroy all my magical items.
So remember Rintrah.
Yeah.
Rintrah is his apprentice at this time. Okay, that's way too much information.
yeah,
Sorry.
the point is he blew everything up, and so now he has to.
he gets into Rintrah's body. They go to the planet where Urthona lives. The astral form is behind Rintrah. The astral form's in him. Doctor Strange's body is just like chilling in the background in a cryo sort of state. They get to the planet, and since this Urthona has never seen Doctor Strange, he assumes that Rintrah is Doctor Strange. And since Doctor Strange's spirit is inhabiting Rintrah, it essentially is Doctor Strange. So this giant extra-dimensional Minotaur is fighting this weird, don't even know how to describe him kind of
Just
guy.
an alien.
Just a weird alien guy. And they're fighting, and in the meantime, they have this female hero named Topaz, I want to say. Is that correct? Topaz.
Who, depending
who's
on which
basically
comic
an
you-
empath.
Yeah, depending on which comic you read, she's either blonde or a blonde white woman or a dark-haired Indian woman.
Yeah, depending on...
Comics.
Comics!
But he has her and Wong captive because they were in the Sanctum Sanctorum when it was stolen. So Rintrah ends up helping save them, but in order to save the friends, Doctor Strange essentially destroys the entire Sanctum Sanctorum. That includes the Book of the Vishanti, the Eye of Agamotto, like it all gets destroyed.
Yeah, and so he has to now rely, like the game has changed, and so in the next Strange Tales series, he is now relying on black magic, on
'Cause that's all it
calling on
exists.
darker entities,
Yeah.
and then also he gets injured and very very quickly and winds up wearing an eye patch for much of that series. And this was just part of the
It had something to do with like the dark energy behind it, like had corrupted that eye or something
Right.
like that. I think, yeah.
You know,
Which
as
is why he
happens.
wore an eye patch.
as happens.
Naturally.
But I mean, this is like when it comes down to it, this was the late '80s. Comics had experienced upheavals and deconstructed stories, such as in Alan Moore's Swamp Thing, in The Watchmen, in The Dark Knight Returns, and certain people took from these stories, this were great character pieces, and we must do better character pieces. And certain people and editors said, well, these were dark, therefore what we need to do is be darker, and our comic books will be better. And that's sort of what happened with several characters. So in Doctor Strange's case, we depowered him, we went to literal black magic, and gave him an eye patch. Of like, now we have Doctor Strange for the late 80s. Like, it's the 80s, man.
Dark and gritty.
So what happens, though, when he destroys all of those artifacts is it turns out those artifacts were helping keep other beings from invading the Earth.
Right.
Like there's a demon named Kahat, I want to say. Like, it's not, like there's a Kahat and then there's like the leader of the Kahat. It's actually the cover of the Strange Tales volume that you can buy, the trade paperback, has that character on it if you want to show that real quick. But I have it on Comixology, otherwise I would be like, here it is. But he's one of the demons. There's other entities that start invading.
Which is another great thing about Doctor Strange, that there's constantly an idea of consequence, which is great for narratives.
Yeah.
So this gets into... I'm gonna throw this question in here, but as we discuss I'm very interested in the topic you led up, which is are there rules to magic? What does that mean? What does it mean to have rules? This is a similar sort of question from ActCat.
Hi, ActCat.
Yeah, and by the way, we have some bits. I'm gonna read out your messages at the end. Y'all are really sweet. Question: Darko Suvin, great name. That's in there. Distinguishes sci-fi from fantasy, mainly in that sci-fi follows internally consistent rules that stem from a singular thematic difference from reality, whereas fantasy is non-realistic writing that is not ruled by this constraint. Given this definition, which I'd say we can take a moment to comment on whether we like or dislike this definition, would you consider Doctor Strange sci-fi or fantasy, and why?
Can you give me the definition again?
Darko Suvin distinguishes sci-fi from fantasy, mainly in that sci-fi follows internally consistent rules that stem from a singular thematic difference from reality, whereas fantasy is non-realistic writing that is not ruled by this constraint.
I
think the idea being like, if you decide spaceships are real, you don't also necessarily get to say that things are invisible. If you're writing hard sci-fi, that would certainly apply.
I mean that's the thing. Like in both sci-fi and fantasy, I think both need to rely on an internal consistency, but also both will have exceptions for dramatic purposes. So, for instance, like Star Trek has its internal consistency of these things happen, and this is how our technology works. But then there will be one episode where something happens like, but that's impossible. That's not how it works. Like, well, they did a thing. Or like, well, Q rewrote reality. And so you
that doesn't all of a sudden make it fantasy.
Right, exactly. Likewise, in Lord of the Rings, yes, there's Sauron and everything, but we do get to have a familiar consistency with the characters, so that even though Gandalf is a wizard, if during his one of his major battles in the first book, he seemingly falls to his death. If during that fall he has sprouted wings because he cast some spell and sprouted wings, there are a lot of readers who would have said, wait, mother trucker. There have been many instances where that would have been handy. And instead he had to call on eagles and stuff. So this power can't exist. Like, there needs to be an internal consistency even in fantasy.
Sure.
And some fantasy will go out of its way to come up with more rules. The Dragonlance books followed the idea for Dungeons and Dragons, where any spell a wizard does, once they've done it, it evaporates from their memory, and they have to study it again. And that keeps wizards from essentially being gods. Yeah. So I don't totally agree with that. But the idea of if we went with that, then is Doctor Strange fantasy or sci-fi? I'd say he's more in the fantasy camp, but I mean he lives in a sci-fi world where Reed Richards has a time machine, and his occasional friend is a guy who got bitten by a radioactive spider and had his body chemistry altered. He does live in a world where that's familiar, and any modern or contemporary, some call it urban fantasy book, like Jim Butcher's Dresden Files and all.
Dresden Files, Love and Chat earlier, by the way.
Right, science still exists there. I
do think that
I'm
there's
also going to throw this in, or as we do it.
Do it. No, I was just going to say I think there's an interesting intersection of where science and fantasy kind of intersect,
especially in a comic book universe like the Marvel universe, like DC
which is written
comics.
by so many people.
Right.
Like it's hard to keep like a consistent.
And I would say also like the
logic, you know,
the definition that ActCat offered is interesting because they define sci-fi as following eternal consistent rules that stem from a singular thematic difference from reality. And that, if you take that, that's sort of a narrow definition of sci-fi, which is a very interesting one. But you certainly, you do depart from that even in things that we would consider straightforward science fiction when you get to a world as big and complex as the Marvel Universe.
Yeah.
It's not all hinged around one single thematic change. Even the science fiction, serves different purposes and works in different ways. I'm also going to throw in Autistic Cosplay, our buddy from chat from the other week, said, question, what do you think are the differences in ancient magic as opposed to science so advanced that it has become magic? It says as writing tools, and I'm not sure I'm understanding that exactly. Science so advanced that it has become magic as writing tools, or as a way of being codified.
As a way to in the first Thor movie where they're like, well, it's just science to us.
Yeah, that's
it's
well,
like a narrative tool, right?
Any sufficiently advanced technology.
Arthur C. Clarke.
Arthur C. Clarke, thank you.
Yeah, it's Arthur C. Clarke's
any
third law.
sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic.
Yeah.
This is sort of the opposite. Maybe any magic sufficiently stable is indistinguishable from science.
Which is actually a Doctor Who quote. The Seventh Doctor in Battlefield, and I want to say it was a 1988 episode. The Doctor discovers that he, in a future incarnation, will be Merlin.
Oh my God, that's awesome!
And says that although Arthur C. Clarke's third law is correct, so is the reverse, which is just one of those wonderful things. But that's another universe. Like in Doctor Who, it's meant to be science fantasy, really. Even though it's these weird abstract concepts, like to the Doctor, this is all science, even if it sounds ridiculous to us. And that includes magic. Whenever he encounters magic, he is defining it in his science.
Yeah.
It's never just magic. Like, these people are using elemental forces. Like, this is not a voodoo doll. This is like a DNA lock avatar. And it's just using advanced magic. Or like, these people learned how to cause scientific changes and chemical changes through words rather than math.
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
There's also a strong, I've heard some really spirited debates on the subject of whether it makes sense to view it as sort of these are all forms of science expressing themselves differently, or whether it's important or useful or serves a function to distinguish fields of science and knowledge. And as you sort of see explored in the most recent Doctor Strange movie, the idea that this should not be considered science because your ways of knowing and interacting with it do not apply here, even though you will study it, even though you will serve it. And it's an interesting I had always leaned towards the former, everything is a kind of science. But my friend sort of sat me down and had a big long talk, and he was just like, no, see, the point is it takes something away from the spiritual dimensions to imply that they have rules which can be understood as easily and coherently as these other things. So I think you could come down on both sides of that one.
In Fantastic Four 500, I want to say, it's in Mark Waid's Unthinkable storyline, drawn by Michael Ringo. Doctor Strange is helping out Reed Richards fight Doctor Doom, who at this point he'd always had some magical knowledge, and in this story just totally takes on further sorcerer might to take on the Fantastic Four, because he knows how much Reed Richards struggles with magic. And Doctor Strange is teaching Reed Richards, scientist that he is, essentially how to use a magic wand, and Reed Richards just can't get his mind around it. So Doctor Strange has the magic wand look like a device that Reed Richards would have done with a button, and Reed Richards still can't because he's trying to figure out the operating system, he's trying to figure out the circuitry, and Doctor Strange finally tells him you have to believe that it'll work. That is this simple talisman. You just have to believe that it'll work. And what happens with Reed Richards, as soon as he says, "I don't understand this," then it starts working. and so it is that interesting. It's in that realm of you could view it as it's a sufficiently advanced science because Reed Richards, who has no magical ability innately, but nor did Doctor Strange, is able to learn how to cast a spell from this thing. Or you can say the fact that it's based on faith makes it a fantasy thing and not science. Because usually electricity does not care if you believe in it. You know, it's science out there. And I mean, that also goes into, like, in Marvel, I do think it's interesting that magic is... There are people born with some innate talent for it, but magic can be learned by pretty much anyone.
Yeah.
Whereas in DC, there actually are genetic factors that have to be part of it.
There you go. So, do we have any other questions?
Oh, we have so many questions.
Let's
don't know.
Let's just do that because I know
we're
having a crossover with the crew over at the Nerdist. They've got some news that we have like that they're going to surprise us with. I don't know.
Exciting.
No idea what it is.
It's going to happen at some
but
point in here.
apparently it's like comic book related or something. What's that?
They'll be crossing over in about 8 minutes.
8 minutes. All right. So
All right.
for the next 8 minutes, we're just gonna.
We can start prepping these. We'll need more than 8 minutes. I'm grouping all of the questions that have to do with recommendations because we will be going
Well,
there.
let me. I pulled some Twitter questions last night. I haven't had a chance to look today, but I pulled some very quickly last night. Katrina, I think it's Kratrina. At Kratrina asks, I'd like to know where to start with Doctor Strange as someone who knows no lore.
All right, we're going
Perfect. The Oath.
there.
The Oath, very simple. It's a straightforward, very accessible book. You get to see Doctor Strange at his best. You get to meet Wong.
Who we keep mentioning but have not explained,
have not
partly because
explained.
we are putting off getting into the sort of problematic sides.
Yeah, there's a problematic side to Wong.
Probably excited to Doctor Strange.
Yeah.
Yeah, true enough.
Okay, but The Oath, we'll get there.
But The Oath is a wonderful series. It's written by
Brian K. Vaughan with art
Brian
by
K.
Marcus
Vaughan.
Martin, I think.
It's a beautiful book, and it essentially tells the story of Doctor Strange is shot by a cursed pistol that belonged to Hitler. It's one of the only weapons that could get through his default magical protective spells that keep him from ever being shot. I'm sorry, I have Agamotto.
It's right up there with a Chekhov gun. Deadly.
So
you, nerds.
he goes to visit Night Nurse. The scene that you get in the movie where he appears to Christine Palmer in his astral form and is telling her like, I would suggest putting the needle here, whatever it is that he says in the film, comes directly from the first issue of The Oath, where he appears in his astral form to the Night Nurse. In this one, I think it's Linda.
So
Yes,
there's
it's
a
not
comic
Christine.
book
It's
character
three, yeah.
who you can sort of think of as a cross between the Christine Palmer character from Doctor Strange and Rosario Dawson from the
Yep.
Marvel Netflix shows.
Yep.
They are sort of based out of the same mythology.
Yeah, there are 3 Night Nurses. But I believe it's Claire Temple who went on to actually be the Night Nurse, like more or less.
Claire Temple was a Luke Cage supporting character.
They've assigned
right,
the Night
that's
Nurse
right.
name to the name of a different supporting character, and they've kind of
It was
comboed
Linda,
them.
but
It
anyway,
is-
there.
it's
it is
Linda
Linda.
Carter because it's really
Linda Carter,
awkward
yeah.
that they're like, really?
Yeah,
And they
Linda,
actually
yeah,
named her
Linda,
before? What?
Carter?
Yeah.
Okay. So Linda Carter is the Night Nurse in this, and they kind of have this
They
bit
should
of a
make it using a
romantic.
different last name now.
Yeah, they should be. Bit of a romantic relationship, but then it turns out that Wong has, I think, cancer.
Yes.
And Doctor
Spoilers for
Strange.
Doctor Strange the Oath.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
this
the
is all in the
premise.
first
That's the
issue.
premise,
That's the premise.
yeah.
And Doctor Strange is trying to find a way to cure him. Thinks he might have a chemical or like a potion that he found in another dimension that might work. Then
Well, let's
everyone
not
starts
give the whole
chasing him for it.
story.
Yeah. So, but there's a great part in there where he basically leaves one of the bad guys in hell. Like it's one of my favorite Doctor Strange moments. Like the guy like threatens him, threatens Wong. Does all these other things.
What
and
you
they're
need to
in
know
another...
for this story is that Wong helps Doctor Strange and is essentially his best friend.
Yeah. And he's Doctor Strange. He's like, all right, well, I'm just gonna leave you here. Bye. Like pieces out, leaves him in another dimension, and the guy's like, "Oh, how do I get home?" It's like, figure it out. You shouldn't have been a jerk.
Yeah, I think the Oath is a great starting point, and as is honestly Jason Aaron's.
Jason Aaron is.
We got questions
his
from
way of
Gavin
the
the
weird,
Great,
yeah.
Dan, Radra, Nearman423, all basically asking, would you recommend the current Doctor Strange book? For someone who's totally sold on the weirdness of Doctor Strange, what's a good place to start reading? And if all my Doctor Strange knowledge comes from the movie, but I really want to get into it, where do I start?
I would say, yeah, The Oath is a great single story.
And it's a standalone, which
And
is
it's a
nice.
standalone. It's only 5 issues, so it's relatively short.
Jason Aaron's The Way of the Weird has been collected, so you can pick that up.
I think it's in 2 trades now, right? Two
Yeah,
PBs, right?
yeah, and then also just for shorter stories, I think if if maybe you're familiar with other superheroes, like Spider-Man or something, like another nice segue into it is the Untold Tales of Spider-Man special of Doctor Strange.
That was only 4 issues, I think, right?
Oh no, this is just a one. This was
But
a
like it
one
was
shot.
essentially like the size of like.
Yeah. But it was a graphic novel. It shouldn't be too hard to track down. And it is the retroactive first meeting between the two of them as they seek out the Lantern of Lantar, and because alliteration is fun.
Who doesn't love alliteration?
You know, but that's and that's again like the absurdity of Doctor Strange is one of the things that I love about it. That's unapologetically absurd at times. And then also I think just for character bits, I think this graphic novel, the Triumph and Torment graphic novel with him and Doctor Doom, is a great story because it also involves him. He had been using the title of Sorcerer Supreme for a while because the Ancient One had died and he had inherited it. But it's in Triumph and Torment here that he has to go through a test that actually earns him it legitimately. And he has to face off against other sorcerers. So it's fun
Dr. Doom
because
being one of them.
Dr. Doom being one of
is
them.
actually trying to become the Sorcerer
So Adam
Supreme.
J. Pearson had asked, what are the must-reads of the Marvel Magic Universe? Which is this is probably going to be one of the answers.
This
to.
is absolutely one of those,
Absolutely.
yeah.
You get to see other aspects of magic users. You get to see the Vishanti. Another like if you are familiar with Doctor Strange or looking for must reads, then I'd say a Separate Reality trade.
That's actually on my list. Separate Reality collects mostly. The reason I would recommend that is because it collects this series, Marvel Premiere. Marvel Premiere. Marvel Premiere. 3 through 14, which is 3 separate stories. There's the first Marvel Premiere number 3, which is Stanley. I can't remember the artist, but he wrote that one. And then the next 3 through 10 is them fighting like basically Cthulhu. Like essentially, it's like the writer. I'm forgetting their name.
Is it Englehart?
It's not. I don't think Englehart had taken over at this point.
Is it Stern?
It's Stern. It's
Roger Stern.
Roger Stern. Roger Stern basically has him going up against demons named Cthulhos, Dagos.
Yeah.
It's basically Dagon, Cthulhu, Shoggoths.
Yeah.
There's a Sluggoth demon, and it's because Shuma Gorath, this is the first appearance of Shuma Gorath, is trying to invade our realm.
Hilariously, where did it go? Someone literally asked who came up with Shuma Gorath and what the heck is Shuma Gorath? I can't find it anymore, but thank you for your question.
Shuma Gorath is an extra-dimensional overlord who is basically like Dormammu in a lot of ways. He kind of collects dimensions as he defeats them, then lords over them.
Very abstract.
He's a lord of chaos, basically.
Yeah.
And he is... Yeah, here's Shuma Gorath. Right here. Let's go ahead and... That is Shuma Gorath. Thank you.
It was Kanehurst Crow. Thank you, Kanehurst Crow.
I'd say
some of my favorite story. In fact, going back to the blonde question that we still have not 100% answered, that's how Doctor Strange became blonde. Was fighting Shuma Gorath in the Strange Tales Volume 2.
Right, Shuma Gorath came back years later.
So
he was wearing an eye patch.
Oh, we're doing a crossover?
Yeah, our friends at Nerdist are about to reach out. You're going to have to move that box. Our super high-end audio equipment here. We'll take you in just a second.
Hi, everybody. We're coming over to the
Hello,
Nerdist
we're
in
bringing
just
in
a
the
second.
crew from Geek and Sundry's
the
comic
magic
book
of-
show, the Wednesday Club,
Okay,
to get the
apparently
deep
you can do
dive.
it.
Welcome
All right,
back,
here we
you
go.
guys.
We're
How are
ready.
y'all
5, 4,
doing?
3.
There, I see
Hey.
you. Oh, cool.
Hey.
Wait, I'm hearing him on the TV and not even into my FB, so can I just take my FB out? Because it sucks. Hello? Hello?
Were we just
How are
told
you
to
guys
suck?
doing?
No.
You guys doing good? Is that Dr. Stephen Strange on the chalkboard behind you?
It is.
Wait.
It is. By our
Artist
artist
Ken
Ken
Wynn.
Wynn.
Ooh.
Wow.
That's pretty good.
He's much better than everything I do.
He's
It's true.
our topic today.
Yeah.
I don't own this. I wish I did.
This is my
very
copy
nice.
of first
All right,
appearance
so
of
let's
Dr.
get into it here,
Strange.
guys. So if
All right.
Chris Evans is done with the Shield, where could Marvel go with the character?
Wait,
Now, we've
what?
seen- Yes, surprise. Surprises, spoilers. He's out.
I guess he hates money.
Now we've seen
Not really
both
much.
Bucky and
Oh no, you've gone silent. At the worst.
Can you guys hear us?
Yeah, okay, now we got you. Yeah.
We got you now, but we didn't hear anything before.
Okay, roll that back. Let me see what. Okay, so here's the question again. If Chris Evans is done with the Shield, where could Marvel go with the character? Because we've seen both Bucky and Falcon take over as Cap in the comics. Do you think that they would replace him, or do you think Marvel would recast Evans kind of a la Terrence Howard's War Machine or Edward Norton's Hulk?
I think there's only one place you can go.
Alex was our guest today on the Wednesday Club. Hello, Nerdist.
Hello.
Hi.
Captain Werewolf from the 90s when he became a werewolf. Like, clearly that's the best way for Marvel to go. Like, get the Twilight fans that are hungry for more wolf stories. I don't see how that could fail. I don't see. No, but in all seriousness, I think thematically, like, the Marvel Universe in cinema is setting itself up for multi-generational stories. So you can have Steve either die or kind of take off into another life and just decide, like, this soldier's done enough. And then I would hope turn it over to Falcon and let that fly for a while and let that be sort of the next generation of stories for that character.
It is.
So you think it's going to be Falcon and not Bucky Barnes?
I would prefer that. It absolutely could be Bucky. I don't know if Sebastian Stan would not want to spread out his wings and try out other franchises.
That's a good point.
I think also, like, I mean, some of the criticism Marvel's been getting, that as great a job as they're doing, it's still a very white universe. And if you can have Captain America be a great character we're familiar with, who's also representing a different side of America, I think that would be a big win for them on multiple categories.
Cool.
Yeah.
I agree.
Anybody else?
It is very interesting that, like, I'm desperately loath to leave behind Chris Evans' Captain America because it's been amazing, but he's sort of the best situated of any of them to pass the mantle to someone because they have two really compelling potential replacements, like, sitting right there. I like your arguments for Falcon. I don't know what you do with Bucky in the meantime. You could also, like, it would probably exhaust the public, but you could have Bucky sort of take it on, decide it's not for him, and have Falcon step up. That would be a more comic booky but less easy to market way to do that. I
mean, I think the best place for Sebastian Stan would be to keep the darkness of the Winter Soldier and, heck, give him and Black Widow their own movie or like a Netflix miniseries for 6 episodes where they're just being cool and stealthy.
Matt, what do you all think?
I think that a lot of the actors who have been with Marvel from Phase 1 are probably going to phase themselves out into Phase 4.
Yeah.
Right? Like, because they're all they're 10 years older, 12 years older in some instances. So I think it's entirely possible that Phase 4 is going to be a completely new reality. Like, I think, like, Thanos may come in,
like
reset
a reboot,
everything.
Wow.
Like First Class, X-Men style.
I'm not even, like, just throwing that out as, like, I think this would be interesting. I think that's what they're doing.
Now,
Like,
see,
I
I'm going to
think
be the
they'll have-
dark horse. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I'm going to be the dark horse here.
Go for it.
And I think they should just, doing strange hands. Kyle can actually do the spells. I think they should actually wind up recasting Chris Evans and maintaining this character of Steve Rogers because he is such an integral part of the lore. I like what you guys are saying. I want Falcon to still be Falcon. I want Bucky Barnes to still be the Winter Soldier. And we've already proven, I mean, time and time again, look how many times we've recast Spider-Man, look how many times we've had a new Batman. I don't think the public would riot. They would just take some getting used to.
Yeah, I feel like we haven't gotten enough Falcon yet. Like, I like the idea of him eventually taking up the mantle of Captain America, but I just feel like I'm still getting used to him just being the Falcon, and I haven't seen enough about the Falcon that it's making me going to want to like him enough as Captain America. Does that make sense?
I think that, yeah.
And I think that's why, what you and Dan are saying are basically, like, kind of almost what I'm suggesting is what they're going to do with Phase 4. Like, they're probably going to recast Captain America. We're probably going to still continue to get maybe some Falcon and stuff like that, but I think some of the major characters will end up being recast. And hopefully, like, what would be cool is if they did Patriot.
My Young Avengers.
Young Avengers, like, if they did something like that, that would be pretty cool.
I mean, that you can also do that.
It'd be difficult to do in a full reboot because that set of heroes is closely tied to the legacy.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Also, you can bring in Patriot from Young Avengers as maybe like the next Captain America, with now Falcon and Bucky no longer the sidekick apprentices of Steve, but now the mentors of the person who's taking on his legacy. I would be down for that because then everyone gets to keep their individuality.
And then you get this great moment where, like, he earns the shield and they're like, Here's the shield, son. And he's
Yeah,
like,
yeah. Yeah.
But Dan does make the good point that they probably don't want to stop making stories about Steve Rogers. Like,
Yeah.
in the long term, there's probably going to be a Steve Rogers again.
In the long term, yeah, but I mean for the immediate,
I
like,
see it.
whatever movie is after the last Avengers movie, I don't see them rebooting quite so quickly.
Yeah.
All right, well, guys, I got to interrupt you because we've got a whole rest of the show to do.
Sure.
But thank
Ah.
you for your points. Thanks for talking Avengers, guys. You can
Thanks for
catch the
having
Wednesday
us.
Club in their natural habitat from 12 to 2 p.m. PST Wednesdays on Geek and Sundry's Twitch. Bye. Have a good show.
Thank
Bye,
you. You guys
guys.
too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right.
You can put away your super high-tech pieces of your equipment.
Thank you. Thank you.
Man, no more Chris Evans.
That's... Wow.
He's
But,
going
I
to be
mean-
busy fighting David Duke.
Well, and he said he
him
wants to
in the face.
direct. He's ready to start directing.
Exactly, and he
Yeah.
said that after Winter Soldier.
Yeah, he's like, I'm gonna eventually, like, this isn't surprising news.
Yeah, he's been wanting to get out of slowly get out of acting and start directing.
But like again, like going back to the Phase 4 thing that I was saying, like Marvel, if you notice, like their next series of films, hardly any of them take place on Earth. Like
Right.
like Wakanda is Earth, but it's not an Earth that we know. Ant-Man and Wasp is going to be all quantum realm. Like they're probably, in fact, I think they're probably going to the microverse for half that.
I mean, that's
film.
really what the quantum realm is. It's
Yeah.
just a better name.
Yeah.
You don't like microverse? Full of micro machines and microwaves?
The Micronauts.
And the dude who talks really fast all the time.
I love that man.
That man is amazing. So I really think that Marvel's going to take it in a weird, like, cosmic direction and kind of leave, which is why Captain Marvel's coming in, Doctor Strange is
Yeah.
coming in, you know, Ant-Man and the Wasp. Like, you have these weirder characters, and the Guardians are still going to be around. So anyway, Doctor Strange. Let's get back to it.
Y'all keep hitting us with these wonderful questions. So we were doing recommendations.
Recommendations. You had brought up Separate Reality. That is the trade paperback to go find if you want to get like some great early Doctor Strange, but like post Ditko lead.
And I mean, once
You can read the original Stanley Steve Ditko stories. They've been printed a number
That's
of
an
times
omnibus,
in
yeah.
various editions.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, especially if I mean the Masterwork stuff, the original Stan Lee, Ditko, Kirby stuff of the Marvel Universe is usually what I recommend for parents who are looking for comics for their kids.
Yeah.
Because it's the familiar characters, but you don't have to worry about anyone like cursing or extreme bloodshed or, you know, if Wolverine's going to take someone's arm off.
Yeah, it's and the early like Ditko Lee stuff. That one of the things that I love about it so much, and you had brought this up earlier, is that Ditko was such a straight-laced, button-up guy, and was drawing visuals that people were seeing on LSD, and like that's when like psychedelic sort of hippie culture is like really coming into it. And
Yeah, it just predated it. Like it got in
just like a year or two before that sort of hippie culture started
which
up.
is remarkable.
And people are reading this going, this guy's gonna be high all the time. And Dick goes like, I don't even drink. Like,
You know, and on the
I
flip,
love that.
But there's wonderful surrealist imagery
Yeah.
woven throughout.
and on the flip side of that, Stan Lee used to get asked what books he read to know so much about the occult and what he was referencing. It's like, I'm just alliterative, man.
Yeah,
like,
I'm just making
I just
alliteration,
like,
yeah.
oh, like the Dread Dormammu. That sounds like a thing.
That sounds like a thing.
You know, like the Vapors of Altor, the Crimson
Sure.
Bands of Sidorak.
Those are all spells that I could utilize.
You know,
Yeah.
I mean, and they sound so perfectly Stan. Like, if you can hear Stan Lee saying it, he wrote it.
Stan
Like,
Lee
it's-
loves alliteration, and he loves adjectives. It was the Amazing Spider-Man,
Yeah.
the Fantastic Four, eventually the
He's a
Uncanny
sales
X-Men.
guy. He's an editor
He's
and
real
a
good
writer,
at
but he's
that.
also a salesman.
the
Like, he's great
Invincible
at it.
Iron Man.
Yeah. And he also loved to reverse words, like the power cosmic. He's like, I heard an interview where he's like, you can't call it the cosmic power. That's okay. But the power cosmic, that's something.
And
You
so,
know, like-
this is another
Which is
thing.
actually a poetic impulse, but he makes
Yeah.
it sound like mere shillery.
yeah.
Yeah, and that's another thing that interests me about how magic is played in the Marvel Universe, because you've got magic, which we've talked about, like different energy fields or borrowing stuff from people in other dimensions, and then you have like the power cosmic, which by any other definition should just be called magic, but they don't refer to it as such. It's
It's a
associated.
channeling of like cosmic power.
Channeling of cosmic power. I'm like, but that's magic. And like later
No.
on, they even talk about how the reason why each of the people who have the power cosmic, like the Silver Surfer and Frankie Ray and Airwalker, the reason why they all have it in such different ways is that, and they use the word soul. The power cosmic sort of replaces your soul and is influenced by it at the same time, and therefore it becomes individually towards you. And people are like, oh, what a far-out sci-fi concept. And I'm saying, that's magic! That's totally magic!
It's just magic!
Which is fine. But the fact that we like, distinguish that as, like, this weird alien concept from Doctor Strange just pulling energy from the stars is so funny to me.
So let's, on reading suggestions before we jump into anything else, I wrote down a few ones. The Way of the Weird is the current one. If you just want to jump in,
written by Jason Aaron and art by Chris Bachalo.
And it's fantastic. In fact, Jason Aaron did something that, like, if I was ever given the keys to the Doctor Strange kingdom as a writer, this is what I would have done, and that is see, like, basically like a person walking by and seeing Doctor Strange kind of like hunched over against a wall and saying these weird words and wiggling his fingers, and that person walking by going, what is going on with that guy? That poor homeless man who's just like drunk or something. But then to switch and see it from Doctor Strange's perspective, and he's actually fighting a demon that's on your back because he can see that realm.
Yeah.
That's what I've always wanted to do. And in the opening pages to Jason Aaron's run, I saw that and was like, well, this just became one of my favorite Doctor Strange books. Like,
Jason Aaron is a great writer. One thing that he does with any character he goes on is he just turns up the volume. He just kicks it into overdrive. His stuff on Ghost Rider was freaking fantastic. His stuff on Astonishing X-Men, where he didn't just bring...
He's in the middle of a Thor run that we'll be talking about for decades.
Yeah, and like I love that when he came back, like his assignment was, okay, bring back Nightcrawler from the dead.
Yeah.
So he's like, I could do it the lame way, like, oh, Mr. Sinister clone him or something. But instead, I'm going to have us in a story where we go to heaven on a pirate ship.
Amazing X-Men, yeah?
Yeah, Amazing X-Men, yeah. And I was like, I love this. He
Love it.
just goes full blast.
Well,
this is the Marvel Universe. Let's
his
have
run on
fun.
the X-Men, what was it, Wolverine and the
Wolverine and
X-Men?
Yeah.
One of my
Like,
all-time
when
favorites.
I first started it, I was like, oh my god, this is so comic booky. And then like 3 issues in, I was like, this is so comic booky. Like,
Exactly.
I would love, like,
Exactly.
Like,
And the
it
same
took
writer-
Let's rock this.
We may have touched on a bit of him when we were doing our Image Comics episode, because he also does a ton of independent work. And this is just a shout out to Jason Aaron moment.
He's great.
He's got incredible range.
Yes.
He does like compelling crime stories. He does
Started with Scalped,
really
right?
sort
Was
of
it- was Scalped
Scalped
his?
at
Yeah.
Vertigo was one of his major books that's I think being made into a TV show right now.
I think so.
And then, of course, he's got Southern Bastards going at Image right now, which is this sort of heartbreaking, like, deep South story that comes very much out of his experiences. And then he'll turn around and do this, like, Wolverine and the X-Men, which is all of the glorious
Just pulpy
fun you can have with
Kid
X-Men.
Gladiator. Like, it's just like, what is going on? Like, you're going to a casino in space with Wolverine and Kid Gladiator. Like, what is going on with this story? I loved it.
So a sense that nothing is off limits is very good in a Doctor Strange writer.
So Separate Reality, as you said, has Time Doom in it, which is one of the most infamous Doctor Strange stories. Time Doom, Doctor Strange actually essentially fights God, and witnesses the simultaneous destruction of our reality and then its rebirth.
Yeah.
And they were afraid to run that story.
Well, Stan Lee got afraid.
He was afraid to run the conclusion. He wanted it changed or something. So the writers, I want to say it was Englehart at this point. Englehart and Bruner, I think.
Might have been.
Or Colin. Gene Colan or Bruner, Frank Bruner were the artists, but I think it was Englehart. They forged a letter from a minister.
In Texas.
In Texas, and sent it in to the Marvel offices, postmarked from Texas, saying, I loved your take. Like, I think this is amazing. And Stan Lee was like, oh, well, a religious man likes it, so we'll run with it. And then they concluded the story. Like, I might be getting that story a little wrong, but like, it's essentially that.
Yeah, like whereas DC will have characters who are angels and literal agents of God show up, Marvel, at least until like the last 10 years, has really been careful that they're still in more of a, we don't know if God exists or whatever. Like, and we're not going to say that one way or the other. Like the living
Santa shows up sometimes, but
like,
aside from that,
right? Like the living tribunal like speaks for one above others. What does that mean? It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And like there are things that might have influenced religion or maybe not.
Yeah.
Mephisto might be the biblical devil, or he might have taken advantage of the myths about it, or he might be the inspiration for the myths. We're not going to tell you either way.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
So in Time Doom, it's just two issues. Doctor Strange discovers that Baron Mordo has discovered stolen a book of Cagliostro from a gypsy woman and used it to go back in time. This is actually kind of featured in the movie a little bit, not much, but a little bit. And Doctor Strange goes back in time, chasing Baron Mordo, discovers this sorcerer named Cagliostro who's writing his book.
Which is a real person.
Turns out Cagliostro was actually a sorcerer named Neg from the 30th century, where they've discovered that sorcery is actually a real thing.
I forgot about Neg.
Which is Genesis spelled backwards.
And they discover that somewhere from this century to the 30th, they discover that magic is real and everybody can use it. But the more people use it, the more it depletes the pool of possibilities. So Neg wants to go back in time to make it where no one can use magic except for him. And the further back in time, the more power he gains, and they go all the way back in time, and he destroys the universe. It's
wild,
insane. And then Doctor Strange and Baron Mordo since they were there, they're the only two people who know that happened.
Right.
So Doctor Strange, and Clea have this weird, when Doctor Strange starts back in Strange Tales, or Doctor Strange Volume 2, they have this weird relationship because Doctor Strange keeps freaking out at the fact that she was destroyed and then reborn, and he knows that she's not necessarily a facsimile, but she's not the original Clea that he fell in love with, and it is weird. It is so weird, and he goes back in time, and she and Ben Franklin have this weird encounter.
When and where is this one encountered? Somebody tweeted that at us, I think.
This is the beginning of Strange Tales. Actually, I think I wrote it down.
You tweeted it.
Not Strange Tales. Doctor Strange. I think it might be. It is Doctor Strange Volume 2, number 18 by Steve Englehart and Gene Colan.
Okay, we talked before about volume. Volume is a loaded word in comics. It means two different things. It can be confusing. If you are reading a series of collected editions where it's book 1 of the story, book 2, the first chunk of the story, season 1, season 2, season 3, or the next 6 months at a time, you'll be saying volume 1, volume 2, volume 3. So when we say that there are 3 volumes of Jason Aaron's Doctor Strange out, that means 3 collections have come out of Doctor Strange by Jason Aaron. But when we say Strange Tales Volume 2, what we mean is the second time they decided to have a comic called Strange Tales,
after the first one had been canceled.
The first one ended and hadn't been published for a while, they wanted to be able to keep track when someone's looking at, do I have this? Do I not have this? What did we publish? It's a little bit easier if you go, all right, well, this is the second round for this title. It's Volume 2 of Strange Tales. I'm probably going to repeat this one every couple of weeks just because it does come up a lot.
The other way to say it is
talking about an issue number, a specific issue number within the run of comics that is known as Strange Tales Volume 2.
And that could also be said the 1974 Doctor Strange run.
Yeah.
Because it started in 74 and went to 80 something, the mid-80s, yeah.
How much time do we have? Because I'd like to get
30 minutes, yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, awesome.
Tons more questions.
I just want to make sure we get everyone.
We're not going to get everyone.
Well.
You guys are great. Let's see. We've got
are you saying that, or did someone say that?
That was her.
Oh. You guys are great.
You guys are great.
You're in this tablet. You don't know that, but you are. The Sizzler sounds like a steak restaurant, Piper's Twin says. I think it's a compliment. I think they mean that you sound delicious.
Okay.
Oh, I'll take that.
Favorite Doctor Strange team-up from Adam Pearson?
Oh.
These are going to have to be lightning rounds.
I always like him with Spider-Man because it was fun in the early days of Marvel that all the Jack Kirby characters went off and became the Avengers, and all the Steve Ditko characters, which was mainly Spidey and Doctor Strange, went and were just the weird dudes in New York and had their own thing. And I also liked it because Spider-Man is sci-fi but not Fantastic Four or Iron Man level sci-fi.
Yeah.
All you have to believe is that he got mutated and that he's smart enough to make webbing. You don't have to buy into Tony Stark's idea of he made cold fusion.
Yeah.
And so I like him with Doctor Strange because also he's a character who can take it all in stride. We're fighting a demon? All right, Doc.
Yeah, we can
here.
do it. I love the early, the very first run of Defenders where he was teaming up with Namor and Silver Surfer and Hulk because they are all the most OP characters in the Marvel Universe, so overpowered. So to have all of them on a team is ridiculous.
Yes.
None of them got along.
Yeah.
And I loved
it. Was the non-team.
Yeah, it was the non-team. None of them wanted to be a team. Hulk was always leaving it. He hated everybody. And I just love that they were constantly clashing, yet they would still find a way to fight. Who was not Xandar, but Xandu or something like that in the Winds of Watum. I don't know. Anyway, That
The
was
Defenders.
Defenders,
Not
yeah.
technically a team up, I guess, but my fave Doctor Strange, I loved him running around with the new Avengers. Bendis,
God,
after
I did love
Avengers
that.
disassembled.
That was a good storyline.
It was sort of for me, it was the first time I really saw him hanging out with a team like the Avengers, even if they were sort of the alternate Avengers at the time. And it's an interesting balance because he does bounce off of other people in very different ways.
That the very, very, very last issue of Bendis's New Avengers run almost made me cry. Like, it made me teary-eyed, legit teary-eyed, because
You got a paper cut?
yeah, because I got a paper cut on my throat. It was a nasty.
Oh,
it was weird.
how?
I'm just
You
kidding.
were like, comic!
Comics. Oh, get at me.
That's not how you read, Matt.
I was learning. I was new to comics still as of 2 years
Apply
ago.
directly to head.
Why is it not going in? This is not how reading works. No, because like Doctor Strange had relinquished the title of Sorcerer Supreme when he used dark magic to fight the Hulk. And he had lost it here and there, but for like 3 years he wasn't the Doctor. Brother Voodoo,
Yes.
Dr.
We have a
Voodoo,
couple Brother
took
Voodoo
over the
shout-outs in chat as well.
Sanctum Sanctorum, and Doctor Strange was just like a dude wearing a trench coat who happened to know some magic. But then like the Ancient One and Damien Hellstrom appeared to him after he defeated Daniel Trump, the brother who died,
Right.
who was inhabiting, like he was a disembodied spirit who, after Brother Voodoo died, he was released.
Yeah.
And he was inhabiting all of the Avengers. So Doctor Strange was essentially fighting every single last Avenger, but still trying to not hurt them and using all sorts of different spells. And he eventually had to use black magic to get rid of Daniel Drum. And he was like, oh, well, I'm not the Sorcerer Supreme, so I guess it's one more black mark on my soul. And then the Ancient One appears to him and is like, no, sometimes you do whatever is necessary, and that's what makes you the actual Sorcerer Supreme. And the Cloak of Levitation and the Eye of Agamotto reappear on him, and it's a full-page spread. And I was just like, oh, yeah, the Sorcerer Supreme, man, you did it! You did it! You did it!
That was a really good story.
was a
Stuart
great
Eminem
story.
drawing that one?
Yes.
Was that?
I feel like it was
Yeah,
Stuart
that
Eminem
was
was the
Stuart.
artist on that run. It was good times.
Yeah, good
I-
question.
I am going to segue us into Ahsoka Grey asking, what are the problematic aspects that you mentioned earlier? I'm going to say my summary on this is that Doctor Strange has his origins in a different time.
Very true.
A time that we might gently call a more background racist time. And it's not... There are issues, as you may have heard about. Some folks had disagreements over some of the casting choices in the Doctor Strange movie. One of them being that the role of the Ancient One, which was... everyone sort of agrees that the Ancient One, as we meet him in the early 60s, is kind of a stereotypical wise old Asian man of
at the
indeterminate
mountaintop,
origin.
He is.
Such as you saw in countless similar stories at the time. And in the manner of many of those stories, the star pupil who turns out to be gifted with the legacy of what is, depending on the story you read, more or less strongly associated with that region of the world, ends up being a white dude from America.
Yeah.
Those are elements of the basic construction of Doctor Strange that you either live with, change, or depart from. Like,
It's the
Because
the white savior sort of.
The White Savior,
Yeah.
the Great White Hope,
Yeah.
and again, when I was mentioning earlier about how Doctor Strange was actually a bit of a throwback character to like 1930s characters. So many 1930s characters, whether they were occult specialists or sometimes literal superheroes, had origins of like the Thin Man, the Blazing Skull, Green Llama, and more. All had this origin of a white dude who found a hidden society in Tibet or China or
Like a
underneath
Shangri-La of
Japan
sorts, yeah.
or Shangri-La, met these Asian people who had these secrets but never thought to like do something proactive with them and go out into the world and be heroes. They took this white man would take the ancient Eastern secrets and then go out and be a hero. And that was seen time and time and time and time again, and Doctor Strange did it again. Although interestingly, in the first handful of stories, there were readers who thought that he was Asian based on the way
because of the way he was drawn.
the way
there
Steve
was
Ditko
a
drew
really
him.
awkward prototype character before they did Doctor Strange, Dr. Drum, who unfortunately actually turned into an Asian guy when he did magic and was a white guy the rest of the time.
Yeah.
So it could have been worse.
But yeah, I agree. There's nothing, it was done in the 60s, so there's no hiding from it like that. That was done. No one saw a problem with. Well, no one like white, saw a problem with it
No
at
one
the
they were
time.
listening to. Saw
Yeah,
a problem with it.
And yeah, that's definitely problematic. I don't think you need to ignore that or say like, but I still like the story. You can like a story while recognizing, no matter what time period it came out of, that there are problematic elements of it.
And we hope this will always be true. It is not only appropriate but necessary to critique the things that we love.
Yeah, absolutely. And then on top of that, like eventually you introduced Wong, who again goes into this other thing of
We've mentioned 800 times and never told you anything about.
Like you go into that
Because
classic.
he was a manservant.
Yeah, he was Doctor Strange's manservant who.
He was an Asian valet.
Yeah, he was an Asian, which
He's
again
really
goes
damn
into
lovable.
so many adventurer characters in the 20th century before then were like wealthy white guys who had the trusted Asian valet who only had one name, not a first and last name, just the one
Wong.
name, whether it's Kato or Wong.
Which they made super cute in the movie.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the thing. Like and I actually gave Derrickson credit that he later in an interview said we made a mistake. Like we had good intentions, but even if you're choosing the lesser of two evils, and this is his words, you're still choosing an evil.
Yeah,
and that
This is, I think, a Scott Derrickson interview with Jen Yamato, I think, the journalist. It's really worth reading.
It is. And, I mean, he brought up, like, we did this because I was trying not to write, if we did want to make the Ancient One a woman, but then we thought, well, we're just making her now the dragon lady stereotype of fiction. And so we did this. And he said, I didn't realize until later, like, we had participated in an erasure. And I think that's very important because there are several stories. Baxter Stockman is actually one of my favorite examples of this. In the original Ninja Turtles cartoon, when they brought in Baxter Stockman, there was a fear on the producers, well, Baxter's black in the comics, and he's our only black character here. If we make him a villain, like, are we saying, like, black people are villains? No, so the solution was turn him white. That was their solution. When the solution could have been, make one of these other characters also black. Don't make him the only black character in the cartoon.
Yeah.
And likewise, when people, like, bring up, not just about the Ancient One, but about other characters, like, well, if you have them Asian, then it's a stereotype. Like, well, no. To me, the solution to that is
only if they're the only Asian person in the world.
Only if they're the only, but also, like, you can fix it by not writing them as a stereotype. Write them as a character, and give them other dimension beyond. I have all the answers because I'm old and wise, and from another culture that is not America.
And it is tough because, of course, I think we all sort of generally agree. I think Tilda Swinton gave a wonderful performance,
Which was never
But
a question of mine.
It sort of must be separated from this this context where it's not clear whether they made the best possible choice.
initially, like, I can remember, like, waiting on casting with bated breath because, again, Doctor Strange.
Yeah.
And I was like, why are they casting Wong? They haven't announced Wong. Like, they're into production. Why haven't they announced Wong? And they hadn't announced Wong because they had planned on not using Wong. And it was because Wong is a stereotype, and we don't know how to address that. And they eventually, and I think it was because of the backlash with Tilda Swinton, they were like, all right, we'll make him an Asian
We won't
character.
make a movie with literally no Asian people. in it.
Which is appreciated. It's a step in the right direction. Like, it does, but it also doesn't erase the problem with Tilda Swinton, which is a problem. And whether
there was a really cute moment. I got to talk to a lot of the cast, which was a really amazing experience. And there was a moment that didn't make it through into the final cut version, where Benedict Wong, when I was asking about getting the part, he told this adorable story about being that he's English and he's friends with Chiwetel Ejiofor. And so at some point he was just like, "Oh, what are you up to these days?" And he was just like, "Oh, I'm doing this Doctor Strange movie." And so Benedict Wong was like, "And I'm nosy, so I went and looked it up." And he was like, and I looked it up and I went, "Wait a minute, Wong, there's a part for me in this thing." His name is literally Benedict Wong.
Yeah.
And so when I sort of asked him what drew him to the role, obviously it doesn't end up being like he's not the lead character of the movie, but he specifically said, you sort of look around and there's not a lot of super Asians. So one of the, he was explicitly acknowledging that, like, he wanted to step into this heroic role, which I think is cool.
and that's very cool. Yeah.
More.
And one of the things that they've done with Wong in the last, 15, 20 years is given him way more. Because, like, in the 60s and 70s, he was very much, keep my house, feed me, make me tea, keep my library.
Yeah.
But in the 80s and very much more so the 90s, he started accompanying Doctor Strange. He started showing that he knew magic. He started showing I do way more than just keep your house. And then there are other stories, like one of my favorite frames, I can't remember where it came from, but I just remember the frame so well. Doctor Strange is so hyper-focused on doing this magic kind of thing. And I think this may have been in a New Avengers, because it feels like a very Bendis moment. He's like focused on doing this one specific task, and he's so in his own head that he doesn't realize that he's under attack.
Right.
And Wong is protecting him. Doctor Strange is clueless to it. Wong is just behind him being a badass.
I think this may happen in the Oath as well.
I think it does. A similar thing happens in the Oath.
Probably happens on a daily basis.
Yeah,
Come on, guys.
So. And then it cuts to like Doctor Strange turns around. He's like, "Is everything okay?" And like Wong's dragging a body behind him. He's like, "Yes, everything's fine." And she's like, Wong is so awesome.
In the late 80s, we started really developing Wong as a character and gave him a love interest and gave him desires.
Sarah Wolf? Or was she the secretary? There was a...
Yeah, but like we were giving him desires and goals and a personality outside of serving Doctor Strange. And that made him a character.
Yeah.
It's actually not that hard to subvert the stereotype, role. The
As
same
long
way,
as you
like if you
give them an actual character instead of
like,
depending on their race to define it.
Right, like having an Asian American be a martial artist is fine if they're more than just the martial artist, if that's not the defining trait. It might be their biggest skill, and it might be something that they really love. But, you give them personality outside of that. Like, the fact that Wong listens to music in Doctor Strange
is great.
Is a great thing. Like, it gives us something to him beyond stony-faced librarian with only one name.
And it subverts your expectations in a small way, which is always a good thing.
One last thing about Wong. Yeah. I love what Jason Aaron did with him in The Way of the Weird.
Yes.
One of Jason Aaron's biggest contributions to the Doctor Strange myth is that magic has a cost. And we've heard those kinds of things before, but in Jason Aaron's, the way he says it is it literally has a cost, a toll upon your body to use this magic. Doctor Strange should have died from all the magic that he's done years ago.
The stresses it puts on your body.
The stresses that it puts on your body and mind and spirit. But Wong found a way to channel those costs into monks who take the pain for Doctor Strange, and Doctor Strange is not aware of it. He has no idea that Wong has done this, and that all the suffering and pain that Doctor Strange comes home dealing with.
I love that I can't decide whether that's a wonderful, nice thing or not. But
he's
it's so sweet. It's so obviously pure in intent.
And the monks that channel that pain into them have done so willingly. It's
if I'm causing harm to someone and you're hiding me from that fact, I would be so mad.
Oh, absolutely.
And Doctor Strange, when he finds out, is of course wait, you've done what?
Yeah.
But there is that I think it was in issue 4 or something like that. This wonderful moment where I was just like, oh my God, that's brilliant! God, Jason Aaron just is so good.
And again, that's how you make a character when they have a different morality than the boss or the person they're serving. That's great.
All right, so more questions. We've got about 20 minutes left, and we still haven't talked about magic characters.
We haven't really branched out. There was. Let me find this. Nerman423 is back with, hey guys, another question. Favorite magical-based comic book character other than Doctor Strange? We sort of covered this in the Marvel universe, but let's say outside of Marvel.
I love Constantine.
Nice.
I really love John Constantine.
He's a great one.
I don't know much about him. I've read a few Hellblazer comics and some of the more recent John Constantine stuff, but I just love the idea that this guy is just he's so put up on. He's just oh, I've got to go do this thing. All right, smokes the whole time he does it, and is brilliant and great at it. But I don't know enough about him to really say, but I know that I like the character and that I want to read more. So.
I mean, and that was the intent was to be a blue collar wizard.
Yeah.
And who looks like Sting, I have a great affection for John Constantine, but I have a deeper affection for Zatanna of DC Comics.
Yeah.
It's fun to me because she has just as much fun doing stage magic as she does real magic. She finds that such a challenge to actually come up with conventional methods and technology, how do I make it look like this guy disappears off my stage? I could just cast a spell and do it, but the challenge of actually accomplishing it through technology interests her.
Yeah.
And also, you don't see a lot of sorcerers who necessarily dig their powers and enjoy the showmanship of it. Zatanna does. She is a showman. She's a performer, you know, and I love that about her. I think she's really fun in that end. Then you go into that she, like many DC Magic users, has a tie to Atlantis. I think is very cool because in DC Comics, Atlantis was a focal point of Earth's magic, the biggest focal point, and the people there sort of evolved from Homo sapien into Homo magi, and all had this like essentially genetic structure that allowed them to access magical energies.
Is this pre-crisis, post-crisis, or
both? It got expanded on more post-crisis as a way to like finally connect all these magic users. So like Dr. Mist was now said to be from Atlantis, and Arion was said before that. But so when Atlantis sinks, the survivors go out and spread among humanity. And so anyone in the DC universe who can truly use magic outside of having a talisman is a lineage of Homo magi.
That's awesome.
I did not even know this.
So like Batman, he can hold a talisman or do a chalk circle and read something and accomplish some minor spell, but he has no ability. He cannot become a sorcerer. It's not in his genes.
Yeah.
Whereas like Zatanna can, because this
And
is
her
the lineage.
dad is
Daughter
Zatanna?
of
Her dad is John Zatara.
Yeah.
Or Giovanni Zatara, as was retroactively revealed. He was the first character. He was introduced in the 40s, and the idea was that he had found Leonardo da Vinci's secret spell book, and if you
Love
don't
it.
know, Leonardo da
I love
Vinci
this so
sometimes wrote backwards, and so what John Zatara discovered was that if you speak spells, your desires backwards, it happens. And later, Zatanna, who was doing this, talked about it's actually just a focus for my energy. Like I have magical energy. Speaking backwards allows me to focus it and concentrate in the right way.
Yeah.
It's not literally no one else just speaking backwards can just do it.
Yeah.
Like, you know.
It's a focus of your intention and
Right,
your
exactly.
desire.
Yeah. But it also makes her incredibly fun because you get to read the backwards dialogue. And also
Which is one of those, like, this is a thing you can do in comics that is particularly fun.
Yeah.
Which sometimes you forget about, like, something as simple as the fact that you are reading the words and looking at pictures can be used for storytelling tricks in ways that other media just don't get to do.
Yeah. Which, and I loved that in, she was later in Justice League Unlimited, but before that she made a brief appearance in Batman the Animated Series. And she is portrayed as just a stage magician. If she's really a sorceress, it's not revealed in that episode.
Yeah.
But when she's performing, instead of abracadabra, she says arbadacarba. And just like that little like reference to like I'm speaking it backwards, nerds. I love that. So
awesome.
so I dig that.
I really do like that character a lot. And
Yeah.
again, like I've said on this show countless times, like DC is the biggest comic book blind spot I have. So like just hearing
us
this
time.
stuff, I'm just like,
yeah,
tell me
like-
more, Alan.
Because DC, like, here's the thing, like, Marvel, for the most part, like, really began with Fantastic Four 1, and it's the house that Jack and Stan and Steve and a few others built. And they later brought in Golden Age characters like the original Human Torch, Submariner, and stuff, but they were reinterpreting them. They didn't actually hold the 1940s stuff to be absolutely canon. So it was essentially like a reboot of that for those characters. Whereas DC, so everything stems from the universe that started in Fantastic Four 1, and so because it was Stan and Jack and Steve as the main architects, there is more of an internal consistency with how that universe operates. Whereas DC, like, you know, Batman and Superman in like 1940 were still in a different publisher than what would eventually create the Justice Society and Wonder Woman, and then those merged, and then later they bought Quality Comics, and then later they bought Fawcett Comics, and then later they got the Charlton Heroes, and so
DC took the gotta catch 'em all approach to
Yeah.
superheroes.
So because of
But
that,
it's a mishmash.
yeah, because of that, you've got this mishmash. Also, because even if you just went to the original publishers, there was no one guiding voice behind those families of characters, and so eventually you had people like Neil Gaiman in the Books of Magic try
I
to.
was hoping we'd get here. Somebody asked about this on Twitter.
So in the Books of Magic, you introduced Timothy Hunter, who looked a bit like the later introduced character Harry Potter, a bespectacled English
A lot of fans
boy.
got mad, but Neil was cool with it. Everybody shares influences, and it probably was not a direct influence on Harry
Yeah.
Potter.
I really doubt. And he's such a different character. He's such a different character. But Timothy Hunter is fated to be the next sorcerer on the level of Merlin. And so he's approached by 4 mystic characters who had been in DC before but hadn't really interacted much with each other. And Neil brought them together and revealed, actually, these 4 guys talk a lot. And because he liked the visual of it,
Do you
it was
remember the
Phantom
four?
Stranger, John Constantine, Mr. E, and Dr. Occult, who is the first published character by Siegel and Schuster before years later they introduced Superman. And all of these guys, at that time at least, Phantom Stranger later went back to a cloak, but at that time, he, like those other three, wore a trench coat. And so John Constantine loosely referred to them as the Trenchcoat Brigade. And they basically went to Timothy Hunter and are like, so here's the deal. You're going to grow up to be a powerful wizard. Maybe, if you choose magic. So we're just here to make sure whatever you choose in the future, you have an informed choice. And so they took him on a guide through magic in the DC universe, basically. And John Constantine, like, and Phantom Stranger and all, they show him that, oh, these characters talk about drawing power from the Lords of Order and the Lords of Chaos. And that is one source. And then Zatanna here speaks backwards and draws on, like, energy around her and her own internal energies. And don't ever use your real name. Like, you know, come up with something to call yourself. Like, John Constantine indicates my name might actually not be John Constantine.
That's awesome.
And Dr. Occult is very upfront. Like, I'm not actually, like, named Dr. Richard Occult. Like,
as opposed to Stephen Strange.
But
Somebody asked if he wasn't a doctor, would he just be Mr. Strange? Yeah.
Yes, he would be.
Yeah, Dr. Stephen Strange.
Yeah, and you've got
Though
Dr.
perhaps it's pronounced Strange.
But yeah, like it's this great miniseries that if you're not familiar with the magical stuff of the DC universe, it's fine because Timothy Hunter isn't either. So
A lot of people read it completely separately from
How many
DC
issues
stuff.
is it?
It's 4 issues.
That's it?
Yeah,
Yep,
it's in
just
one
a
trade.
miniseries.
There were later books of magic series and miniseries, but the original miniseries is 4 issues by Gaiman, and it's a marvelous thing. And it also approaches that part of magic is how you interpret it, and what you're doing. So like they encounter, there was a supernatural character in some DC comics called Dr. 13, who was a ghost debunker. And at one point, Constantine and him encounter each other.
Yeah.
And and Timothy Hunter brings up he's been learning about magic, and Dr. 13 is like, I've been investigating this for like over a decade. You know, everyone I found and logical explanation, there's no such thing as magic. And Timothy Hunter, when he leaves, looks at Constantine like, so what's that about? And Constantine's like, he doesn't believe in magic, so he's never going to see it. Like, that's how the world works.
Oh, that's awesome.
It's like, this is how, like, if you open yourself to magic, even if you don't decide to, like, study it as hard as you should
You
to
can't
become as
see it.
powerful, like, you can't unsee it. You are now going to and because you see it, other things are going to be able to see you.
Yeah.
Like, you enter that world.
Oh.
And
I
right
love
now,
this.
you're, you know,
This is so fun.
It's Neil
a
Gaiman.
great,
He's
I
pretty
love
good with
Gaiman.
magic.
it's a great
Speaking
like,
of,
you know.
American Gods trailer dropped today. Looks
And the
good.
first issue of the comic book adaptation came out in stores today.
Really? Huh. Well, that's
Speaking of magic in
simpatico.
comics, we've got a little bit more than we did a week ago.
Ah, I love Neil Gaiman.
Also, Dr. Occult, who I mentioned earlier, is significant because in one of his early adventures, he has to put on a magical cloak to fly, and he basically gets shirtless, and they paint this sigil on him that looks suspiciously like the Superman symbol that would appear a couple years later.
Nice. Good job, Siegel and Schuster.
So
Test that
Siegel
idea.
and Schuster were testing that
That's
out.
awesome. All right, what other questions do we have?
I love... Where's this little heartbreaking question? After finding magic, Catmandu 2000 asks, were Doctor Strange's damaged hands ever improved as he originally hoped to do?
They've dabbled with it, like
Improved, not healed.
Improved, not healed, but they've also implied a few times that like they were like in one story I think they weren't actually ever damaged. The Ancient One actually tricked him or something like that. I can't remember.
Somebody
what
else
it was,
also asked
but, like,
who's more manipulative, Professor X or the Ancient One, and now I'm thinking toss-up.
I still say Professor
Professor
X.
X.
Professor X.
Professor
Yeah,
X, definitely Professor X.
Yeah. I mean, Doctor Strange, the nature of the accident has been retconned a few times.
Yeah.
Because in one version, he's assaulted by, like, Nightmare. In one version, Baron Mordo actually causes it because he has seen a future where this guy, for some reason, will become a threat to him.
Yeah.
In another version, he's drunk. Another version, he's just tired.
It's all
You know.
they've changed it a few times.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, comic books always do that. They
Yeah,
love,
exactly.
like a new writer
They're going to
takes
be around
over and
since
he's
the
like,
early 60s.
I think this might be a better idea.
Yes.
I'm going to write it this way. Yeah. So, trying to be more with the times maybe. So
Question from Quizzical Haddock. How are you
Great
today?
name.
great,
I'm-
great. I'm here talking comics. Like, how could,
I'm doing extremely well because I get to talk comics. I love talking about the magical aspect. This is actually, I'm working on two projects right now. One is video game related, and I can't talk about it yet, but the other is an audio play I'm writing that has to do with magical characters. So actually this discussion is very nice in bringing up some ideas and clarifying some points.
And what's wonderful for me is that Alan is one of my favorite people, but we're both so busy we never get a chance to see each other. So anytime I have a chance to, hey, come be on my Marvel show on Tuesday, or come be on this, it's like, great, I get to see Alan, and I get to see Amy.
Excuse to hang out with friends. That's what comic books are good for, guys.
Yay! So we're doing great. Thank you for asking.
Question from Akiba first about the story you mentioned earlier.
Yes.
Was it Time Doom or Time Dome?
Time Doom.
Time
Doom. You can find it in the separate reality graphic novel that collects that Marvel Premiere 3 through 14. That's also the story where the Ancient One dies, and Doctor Strange first becomes
Ageless.
Ageless. It's in this comic actually, and the Sorcerer Supreme, and then he later relinquishes that power when he realizes, oh, I'm not allowed to love Clea as the Ancient One? Nah, I'm good. I'm not going to be the Sorcerer Supreme anymore.
You know what, just briefly, as ridiculous and poorly made as it was, the 1970s Doctor Strange movie...
Stop.
Haven't seen it.
Has one point that I really loved, which was when he's giving this power and he's told about all these things he has to sacrifice, like an easy death. He says to have to sacrifice love, and the ancient Linmer, the Ancient One, tells him, no, love is part of the universe, and you may be open to love. And I loved that idea.
Speaking of love, I want to thank you guys for some love in the form of bits. Star Pilot 6 sent us 300, said, by the bountiful brazier of Balthak, I bestow these bits.
Bolts of Balthak.
Shantup gave us 100 and said, thank you for the show. The Wednesday Club has instantly become my second home. It is something many of us needed.
Welcome to it.
Again, thank you. We're so glad you're here.
What else?
And R. Falarka gave us 1,000. Cheers for Wong.
Aw, yay! Wong is great. I want to close it out with Read Into Shambhala. It's one of my favorite Doctor Strange stories.
Oh.
It is a deep, deep cut.
Into
but it's
Shambhala.
Into Shambhala by J.M. DeMatteis. He's one of my favorite writers. The Oath is great. Triumph and Torment is great. Separate Reality. If you want to dive deep, go for Separate Reality. Also, Montesi Formula. Find Eternity Saga. That's another good one. I'll type it all up on Twitter and we'll have it out there. But
where can they find you on Twitter, Mikey?
What's that?
What's next week?
We haven't decided yet. It's a
TBD.
surprise.
It's my turn, and I gotta decide what to talk about. And there's a lot of good stuff.
There's a lot of good
Look
stuff.
to find it online between now and then.
Yeah.
We'll decide in the next day or two.
Yeah, look at my Twitter in the next day, and I will have a call on next week's show and some suggestions. I'm excited.
And we were going to have Ashley Robinson today, but she couldn't make it, so perhaps she'll be here next week.
I might try to trick her into doing that.
Yeah.
Yep.
But it'll probably be DC related because we've done so much Marvel stuff.
Who knows?
Who knows? Anyway, I'm at the Matt Key on Twitter.
Where can we find you, Alan? Thank you so much for being here.
Sure, no, it's my pleasure. You can find me on the Twitter at Sizzler Kistler, Sizzler Kistler. You can also find my book, Doctor Who: A History, the New York Times bestseller, on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, the unofficial Game of Thrones cookbook, the unofficial Spider-Man Trivia Challenge, and the unofficial Batman Trivia Challenge. I also have an article coming out in Wonder Woman Psychology. Doctor Who Psychology is already out, as is Captain America vs. Iron Man, Freedom, Security, and Psychology. And Star Trek Psychology is coming out, so look for those.
You write a lot.
Yeah.
And I'm Amy Dallen. You can find me at Enthusiamy. And next week we'll have Taliesin back, I think.
I believe we'll have the full crew back. Yeah, I think
Full
so.
strength. Thank you so much for watching this week.
Thank you, guys.
Welcome to the Wednesday Club.